Thank you, John. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you to Donald and the fellowship for having me today. I will speak about Osler as a role model. So for declarations, really none, although I prefer to use American spelling. So when you see spelling that is different than you're used to, it's not a typo. So what I will discuss for the next half hour or so is the importance of role models in medical education. I have dedicated my career to medical education. That's what I study. I will examine Osler as a role model, and then I will offer references about how we can become more like Osler in certain ways. I'm a big reader, and when I mentor junior faculty, I suggest that they read certain books, and I will make book recommendations to you all as well. So what are my creds to speak about Osler? I've studied role modeling extensively over the years. As was mentioned, I spent a lot of time at McGill and now at Hopkins, and thus I've heard the whispering of Sir William Osler constantly throughout my career, and he's guided me towards making diagnoses and when to rethink, when to go back to see the patients. But I'm not a historian. I think I'll also say that at the age of 4, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and Osler was the first to coin that term. That's another connection to Osler that I have. So for the outline, I'm going to talk about what we try and accomplish in medical education, how and why role models are so critical in the contribution, and then Osler as a role model. So this is how I think about medical education. I often keep this picture in my mind when I'm with students and residents and junior faculty. And it really is about guiding individuals who want to become physicians or other healthcare professionals and helping them to become skilled, professional, humanistic physicians. And most of what we have in medical education are old, rickety bridges. So our curricula and our courses and our teachers are okay. None of them are fantastic, and we really need to start doing a whole lot better. But there have been many people who have studied that role models are among our best bridges. So the role modeling of humanistic attitudes and behaviors by faculty physicians has been shown repeatedly to be the most influential method for imparting humanism, empathy, caring to learners. So I think role models are a rather sturdy bridge that are important in medical education. So what is a role model in case you don't fully understand? So role model is considered as a standard of excellence to be emulated. And different from a teacher imparts knowledge or skill through lessons and instructions, and a mentor is more of a longitudinal, wise and loyal advisor. So role modeling is really about observational learning. You watch someone and you learn. And it's been shown that very long ago that animals and humans have this innate propensity to imitate behaviors that they see. And then further studies in elementary school children show that almost anything can be learned that way. Personality traits, problem-solving skills, cognitive development, even moral behavior can be learned by watching others. And Confucius said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember. So, rather important. But for maximal impact in medical education, role models need to be in front of learners. Learners need to really interact with frequently and see the role models. And trainees need to be observant. They need to pay attention, they need to watch the role models and learn from them. So this was a study that we did years ago that was published in the New England Journal, and it was a case control study of role models. And essentially, we identified physician attendings who were viewed by their learners as being role models. It took place at 4 institutions in North America, and we compared the role models and how they teach with those who taught a lot but weren't identified as role models. So to identify the cases, the house staff of these 4 hospitals were surveyed to identify who were the people they considered to be the best role models. And then for the controls, we looked at faculty who do a lot of teaching and were in front of the learners, but were never named to be role models. They were our controls. And then we surveyed them to ask them how they teach and what they do. And at the end of the analysis, there were 4 factors that were independently associated with being identified as an outstanding role model. And they were spending more time with your team when you are award attending, highlighting the psychosocial aspects of care, emphasizing the importance of the doctor-patient relationship, and spending at least a quarter of your time teaching trainees. And you see, all of these are within the control of the teaching physician. So anyone, if they think about it, can become an effective role model. Things that weren't associated with being identified as a role model: gender didn't matter, academic rank didn't matter, how much time one spent in clinical or research, and bringing donuts to rounds, that didn't make you a role model either. Then we did a qualitative study to better understand role modeling, and what we did here was we interviewed 29 of the most highly regarded role models at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. And what we found was that there were 3 main facilitators of effective role modeling: certain personal qualities that I won't go into, certain teaching skills that we learned from the earlier study, and being a really great clinician. Barriers to being a role model were being impatient, being overly opinionated, being overextended, things like not being able to remember names and faces. And then these role models talked about being conscious about being role models. They said they consciously think about the example they're setting when they're with learners, and they were really aware that people were watching them closely and that they had to conduct themselves with professionalism and decorum at all times. So from this qualitative study, we came up with a conceptual model, and at the base you'll see you had to have a certain, in order to be considered a wonderful role model, you had to have a certain amount of clinical skill, you had to think about it often, and then if you had more facilitators and barriers, then you'd be recognized as a role model. And again, at the top of the scale was really masterful clinicians were frequently recognized as outstanding role models. This was an article from The Lancet where Dr. Yusuf wrote, "Unless we in academic medicine recognize those who spend most of their time and are particularly skilled in caring for patients, we will lose them to the private sector. And if we do, then there will be fewer clinically excellent doctors to care for the patients at our academic centers and fewer role models to teach the next generation of doctors." So we wanted to look at that, and we looked at whether the best clinicians were also the role models. And so we did another, this is the last study that we did that I'll share with you. We did 2 parallel surveys. We asked the clinicians at Hopkins who were the faculty, who among the faculty do they think were the most clinically excellent? And then we asked the house staff at the same time who were the role models. And sure enough, there was a very high correlation between being thought of as being a brilliant clinician, a masterful clinician, and also being recognized by the house staff as being a role model. And certainly among the faculty judged to be clinically excellent by their peers, they were much more likely to be also identified as a role model. So really a Venn diagram, the people who are the best clinicians are also the role models, and thus they're important for our patients and our learners. So to that end, at Johns Hopkins, where I've been for 25 years on faculty, we only promote people based on their research accomplishments. And we have a single track, and I'm on the promotion committee there, and until recently, that was the only way to get promoted. So our clinicians felt undervalued and underappreciated, and thus, about 12 years ago, we launched the Miller Colson Academy of Clinical Excellence that I direct, and although we have 6,000 doctors at Johns Hopkins across our system, we induct 6 to 10 clinicians a year who are the very best, the most masterful ophthalmologist, an orthopedic surgeon, an ENT doc, and psychiatrist, and they come together in this working academy to try and advance clinical excellence. And the mission of the academy is to recognize and promote excellence in patient care to benefit our patients and the communities that we serve. So on to Osler. Was Osler a role model in his day? And certainly I was invited with a colleague to write a paper for this issue that we thought was great fun to do. And I think, so would Osler be a role model? I think undoubtedly in his day, Osler was a fantastic role model, respected, beloved, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But would he be a role model today if he were in this room? And a lot's happened, so it's 100 years later. Contemporary medicine is very different than it was. More fast-paced, more patient-centered. Trainees today are different. They're more focused on work-life balance. They're no longer exclusively white men. Things really changed. But, this was one of Osler's quotes, and this is an artist in America who has sent us these. Osler was known to say, the young doctor should look about early for an avocation or a pastime that will take them away from patients, pills, and potions. So he understands the importance of having balance in your life and not only doing medicine. But here are the reasons why I think Osler would still be a well-respected role model today if he were with us. He had an amazing knowledge base. He was remarkably good interpersonally and as a communicator. He had solid clinical judgment. He had profound humanism. He was a prolific writer, very committed to scholarship, and he was passionate about what he did. So I'll go into these briefly and say more. And for each of them, I'm going to describe a book that you all can read that I think is great, that can help you get better in each of these domains. So, Osler was known to have an encyclopedic knowledge in medicine and pathology. He was often sought after to do second opinions. And it was said that he would read constantly at meals, while dressing, on trains, even on vacation. His textbook, shown here, is still considered among the greatest medical textbooks ever written. So I think he was committed to getting better and learning. So this is a book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And I think that I've read this and recommended it to several mentees. And it teaches us that we're all a work in progress. And having a growth mindset means that you understand that today you're decent, pretty good, but tomorrow you need to get better. So it's a really wonderful book. So we accept that we and our skills need to continue to improve. And I think Osler embodied that and was always working to the very end to learn more and do more. Domain 2, he was interpersonally skilled. He was said to have a terrific ability to connect with colleagues, students, and staff. A McGill colleague remembered, I've never known anyone who was surrounded by such a distinctive, attracting personal aura. He cultivated a practice of giving you all of his attention, listening intently, and remarking on an encounter that you had with him years earlier, convincing you that at this moment you were the most important person in the world. So he was truly present. And here, by diplomacy, one of his colleagues said, I've seen Osler, when in consultation, smash the attending physician's diagnosis, let them know that they were wrong in the diagnosis. But nonetheless, they would leave the room arm in arm, and they seemed to be having a good time. So even every physician felt safe. So even when Osler corrected you, people were not insulted. He did it in a lovely way. His students were really impressed at his ability to remember their names and take an interest in their lives. And it was said that once Osler shook a student's hand, he found a friend for life, and the students knew that. How lovely. And a colleague commented on, what was it like to round with him? Ward visits were an unusual combination of informality and dignity. His criticisms were incisive and unforgettable, but never harsh or unkindly. 3 books that I think I've read that have helped in interpersonal skills. Dale Carnegie, a very old book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. How to Talk to Anyone, 92 Trips. And then this book is for introverts, so people like me who are rather quiet and introverted, talks about how even introverts can really learn more and do better at connecting with others. So these 3 highly recommended books. Osler had wonderful clinical judgment, but he modeled humility. He constantly sought feedback, and he really thought often about errors and prior clinical decisions. At Hopkins, he once misdiagnosed a distended bladder as a pelvic sarcoma. And after being corrected by the surgeon, rather than putting the story behind him, he continued to teach about that and certainly bring it up again so others wouldn't make the same mistake that he made. Osler, another quote that's less well known, is, "To confess ignorance is often wiser than to beat about the bush with a hypothetical diagnosis." In his medical practice, he understood that for clinical judgment to be excellent, it all started and ended with the patient. And of course, the quote that we've heard a few times today, the great physician treats the patient who has the disease. At Montreal General Hospital, where I was a house officer, and at Hopkins, he eagerly performed as many autopsies as he could, and he did them shortly after, and he would correlate the postmortem findings with his clinical assessments of right before the patients died, securing precise feedback about his assessments. So really wonderful. So this book here by Malcolm Gladwell, who is a wonderful writer in The Tipping Point and other books, but Outliers talks about how some people are really different and can become masterful, and that it takes many, many hours of practice, as well as getting feedback on how you're doing and reflecting on how you're doing. And it says that outliers are those who have been given opportunities, but who also have the strength and the presence of mind to seize them. Humanism. So Osler was genuinely humanistic. He, at the Montreal General Hospital, he committed and volunteered to work on the smallpox ward, where he, at that time, thought to be very contagious. He took care of 81 patients with smallpox, and at that time, there were no protective barriers like we have today, and many shied away and wouldn't go there. And not only did he work on that unit, but he experimented creatively using all different potions and creams to try and prevent his patients from becoming disfigured by the condition. Osler actually contracted smallpox himself, but he maintained his good humor. He said, "My attack was wonderfully light. Only 2 of my 16 pustules located themselves on my face, so that my beauty has not been consumed away." So even then. And here, also in empathy, one morning a colleague walked into his office, and Osler was gagging and retching, and he was putting down an NG tube into himself. And his colleague said, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And he said, "We often pass these on our patients, and I thought I should know what it felt like." And then Osler offered for his colleague to try, and he said, "No, thank you." But really, really amazing empathy and thought. And one other story about his humanism. One night when leaving Hopkins and walking in Baltimore, he encountered an impoverished woman with a sick child. Moved by their plight, he gave them fare to take a taxi to the hospital and wrote a note saying, "Mrs. Osler's youngest," to ensure that they would really get fantastic care. In terms of how you all and how we can get more close to Osler in terms of humanism, this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Osler really practiced all of the habits, but habit 5 is seek to understand before you try to be understood. And it says, before that we can offer advice or suggest solutions or effectively interact with others, we really have to listen and understand where people are coming from. The second to last domain, Osler was a prolific writer. He rigorously chronicled the natural history of disease. In his time at the Montreal General Hospital, he wrote up a bunch of new diseases, things from Tabes dorsalis to empyema. During his tenure, 10 years in McGill, he completed published notes on 1,000 autopsies. So he had a legendary work ethic. Here are 2 books that are really terrific on doing more scholarly work and writing more and thinking differently. The first is Deep Work, and the author Cal Newport talks about how you can avoid distraction and write and do other work that requires deep thought. And the other book, Creativity Inc., is by Ed Catmull, who's the CEO at Pixar. And that book teaches you how to think more creatively in your work and scholarship. Both are excellent and highly recommended. And I bet that Osler, had he been alive, would have read both of those. Then Osler was really passionate about what he did. in his teaching sessions, his questions were so well placed that students said our knowledge was drawn out of us. He made the poorest students at ease, and the brilliant students were able to bring out more. When Osler left the faculty at McGill in 1884, the entire student body went with him to the train station, gave him a gold watch, and I think it was his passion and his enthusiasm that made everyone love him. At Penn, when he spent time there, one student said his first ward class was an eye-opener. In a few moments, he had every student intensely interested and avid for more. And Osler said, every patient you see is a lesson in much more than the malady from which he suffers, of course. So this is the last book that I recommend. It really gets at being fully present and taking advantage of what you're doing, the power of now. It's really about having full presence and engagement in what you're doing. A quote from the book is right here that I think is lovely. Most humans are never fully present in the now because unconsciously they believe that the next moment must be more important than this one. But then you miss your whole life, which is never not now. And that's a revelation for some people, to realize that your life is only ever now. See, this is the truth. It's always now. And we need to be present and be the best we can in this moment. So is Osler still a role model today? I think even at places like McGill and Hopkins, he's certainly less visible and less remembered than he had been. But I think you would understand that he's not thought of to the same extent as a role model as he was, because it's today's faculty who are at the bedside. However, I think that many of us try and share his stories and his greatness with our learners, and many try to carry on the Oslerian values. But getting back to role modeling, as a division director and educational leader at my institution, in recent years it's become harder and harder to bring together my learners with the most outstanding role models. And to that end, we started an initiative called Osler, where we have members of this Academy of Clinical Excellence who share their perspectives on clinical excellence online every day. The mission is to create a learning community that's thoughtful about clinical excellence. It's from the words closer to Osler, as we said, and it's singularly focused on promoting excellence in patient care. So every day we have a new piece that's written by a physician or a nurse or a pet therapist. They're all short pieces. They're all stamped for a time read, and they all have a 1 or 2 sentence takeaway. We have book reviews. We have patient care stories. We have commentaries on published articles that get at communication. The 4 categories, everything is sorted into 4 categories. One is connecting with patients. One is clinical reasoning. One is passion in the medical profession. And the last is lifelong learning in clinical excellence. We have authors from all over the world. These are a few. Many are from Hopkins in this academy that I lead, but they're from all over. We have people that write stories for us or pieces for us have been mostly physicians, but also nurses, pharmacists, medical students, residents, pet therapists, even patients have written. Here's what every piece looks like. So this is, if you went to our site now, you would find a picture and a title. There would be a 2-sentence takeaway, and then there would be the piece. And a 2-sentence takeaway, we tweet on Twitter every day. So that first one related to sort of best practices in transgender care. And so things like that we identify that aren't taught well in our med school curriculum, we ask an expert to write. So this piece really says, do this, don't do this. And for many of us who never got trained in this, amazingly helpful. Here's a piece from a colleague at Harvard who has talked about how just sitting with, she's an intensivist, how sitting with a dying patient and her family, how important it was to the family and what she learned from that. This is the head of pet therapy at Hopkins wrote 7 things that clinicians can learn from therapy dogs, and the takeaway is, dogs see the person in front of them only as people, not as patients. But there are other really lovely, brilliant takeaways from all of our pieces. We have a video, so once a week we show a video where one of the outstanding members of the academy, this is Dr. Mike Carducci, an oncologist, who talked about his approach to clinical excellence. So we have 2-minute videos of many of the members. We have a question of every Friday is a question of the week. This is where we have doctors answer what's one life lesson that you learned from a patient. And for those who aren't on Twitter and don't go to the Closer site each day, we send highlights, the real takeaways from the week, once a week every Friday afternoon. We've been up and running for a year, and it's taken off more than we could have imagined. So in the last year, we have visitors to our site from 189 countries. We have med schools in different continents saying, could we sign up our students to get the takeaways? Our presence is, as I said, we share it on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter. And here, I often tell this story. So this is a resident in New York who wrote a piece about the importance of the social history, and it was seen by 8,400 patients. And some of the research that I do get published in journals that are never seen by more than 1,000 people, and yet here, a piece that someone wrote in a weekend that was beautifully written was seen by many, many people. So trying to educate on social media can be effective. So there are ways to answer our question of the week. There are ways to subscribe if you're interested. So I'm going to end here on time, and I hope that I've reminded you all about the importance of role models in medical education. I've tried to explain why Osler would most definitely still be viewed as a role model if he were one of our colleagues today. And I've recommended a website and 9 books that can make us all more Oslerian in our role modeling. So I will pause here, and this is another nice quote, and I will decide whether or not to answer questions, because Osler says I can just grunt if I don't really want to answer any of them. Thank you.